everybody. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Megan, head of marketing at Mystoria. We're here to have a practical conversation today about something we hear from a lot of HR leaders at small and medium-sized businesses. How do you create a big impact with a smaller total rewards budget? You don't need a Google or an Amazon-sized budget to give your employees a great experience, but you do need to be intentional and creative. And that's what we'll be digging into today. I'm thrilled to be joined by Japneet and Aaron, friends of Mystoria, and they each bring such unique experiences and perspectives to this conversation. So before we dive in, would love to hear a little bit more about you and your backgrounds, Japneet and Aaron.
You go first.
All right. Hey, everyone. My name's Japneet. I've been in the people ops space for about 15 years now. I've spent the last 10 years working for SMBs, primarily in the tech and professional services space, so really helping them build their foundational HR practices, and thrilled to be here.
And my name's Erin Schnorr. I worked in tech as an account manager before joining Artemis, and we're an executive recruitment agency that partners solely with tech companies. And I've been with the team for just over 7 years now. So we've learned a lot about what are candidates, especially highly talented candidates, looking for when it comes to the company and the role that they want, but obviously then the benefits that are tied to that as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I think you both bring such unique and interesting perspectives. I'm really looking forward to the conversation and the insights that you can both share. So we'll just dive in and we'll try and have as natural conversation as we can. So Aaron, jump in, Japneet, jump in, and we'll try and make this as practical and useful for the viewers as possible. Japneet, I'll start with you. So from your perspective as an HR leader, what are the biggest challenges you think SMBs face when they're trying to offer competitive benefits when they have maybe a more limited budget than some of those more larger enterprise-sized businesses?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges, especially for SMBs, is really making every dollar count. It's there's a lot that we can do within the space when it comes to total rewards, especially benefits, but on a limited budget, you really have to get creative and you really have to understand what's going to truly support the employees in the long run as well. Another challenge I think that a lot of organizations are kind of working through is understanding what employees actually value. And I think bringing the two together can really help optimize not only your total rewards, but also ensuring that you offer a competitive package to the employees. I think the best benefit strategy typically starts with listening and not spending, and this is where we make a lot of HR leaders make one of their biggest mistakes. We try to find like one solution or one model fits all solution, and that really just does not exist anymore.
So Aaron, from the recruitment side, how are you seeing these companies compete against the larger enterprise benefits packages when trying to attract top talent?
Inevitably based on budgets, it's never going to be one-to-one in terms of competition, especially compared to like the Amazons and the Googles of the world. I think in a lot of ways, like from a product perspective, SMBs can compete because they're nimble and they're fast. And I think that can translate to a certain degree to your benefits and perks as well. And so I think to kind of go off what Japneet said, there's an element of listening, but also being really intentional and in tune with what is changing and the fact that it can change quickly. So like we saw over the pandemic when everyone had kids at home and were being caregivers and balance work at the same time. Some of the smaller tech companies that we work with were able to add extra mental support or personal days to their benefits package to make sure that they were showing that they were listening and understanding that that was a need that had changed. At Artemis, we also did something very similar where we had an online therapy tool that we were paying for as a benefit. And then we'd also had a quarterly bonus in terms of kind of like a wellness bonus for all of our team. But we listened, and we also were looking at our usage report and realized that everyone was maxing out their therapy budgets every single year. And so quite quickly, we were able, I think it was in 2 weeks, we worked with our benefits provider to allocate the budget we had on the mental health online platform, plus then taking away that quarterly wellness bonus. And we put it towards a healthcare spending account. So it meant that it had the flexibility for everyone in order, if they didn't max out their therapy budgets, they could use it for something else, and or it gave people then the flexibility to allocate what the extra benefit dollars needed to go in order for them personally. So I think all to say, just the level of flexibility and nimbleness is something that SMBs have versus large enterprises.
Yeah, that's definitely.
The other piece, sorry.
Go ahead, Javneet.
I was going to say the other piece that I'll add to that is benefits only matter if the employees actually know how to use them and know that they're there as well. So education and guidance probably is another crucial part in ensuring the programs that you have, like the mental health program that Erin is talking about, are understood and also appreciated in the organization as well.
Yeah, and it sounds like to achieve both of those things, the smaller the business, the more ability they have to be nimble and flexible in making some of those choices, whether it be adapting what's available to their employees or how to even get that education across to them. Obviously, the larger an organization is, the more difficult it might be to act on either of those.
Yeah, I would say to a certain degree. I think kind of going back to what Japneet though said almost like right off the hop is there's an element of listening. And so I think when you an SMB, you just have a smaller employee pool. And so you can kind of listen to the needs and probably cater to a little bit of a higher degree rather than a large enterprise that has employees across the spectrum in terms of age, familial stage, life stage, all of those pieces. And then it's harder to pivot because there's less of kind of, I think, some of those smaller things that move the dial because the amount of dials that need to be moved are a lot bigger or a lot more of them.
Right. Fair. So you shared some good examples there, Erin. Japneet, do you have any examples of a program or a benefit that you introduced that had a big impact without necessarily requiring a big budget or a budget at all? And what was the employee response to that?
Yeah, one of the programs that I implemented at one of my previous organizations was called Flexible Fridays. Really what the title kind of says, and it costs us virtually nothing. So especially in professional services, clients always come first, just given the nature of the business. But it's also hard when you're constantly working around the clock for the clients to find time for employees to focus on growth, do some of that deep work, or even attend to some of their personal commitments that they might not be able to do during their 9 to 5. And the Flexible Fridays really give the employees that autonomy that they were looking for while not breaking the budget internally. And the result really was trust and autonomy across the board. It shows the employees that we trust you to manage your times. This also reinforced our culture and our EVP without adding external budget. So kind of what Erin was talking on, flexibility is key when it comes to total rewards. It's also just in the world that we're living in today.
And to make that recommendation at the executive level, was there a lot of pushback, or was that a fairly easy policy to put in place? And what type of data did you have to kind of pull on to convince them?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we kind of going back to listening, we did a lot of pulse surveys internally, and this is something that I also recommend to a lot of smaller organizations that do have capacity to do it, whether it's using your regular ENPS service, your engagement surveys, to really just check in to see what the employees are looking for. And so we had a lot of data points coming in through some of those conversations, the pulse surveys, and just the informal check-ins that we did with the employees to show that they really needed time to balance their own growth, their own sort of like focus and so on forth, while managing the client engagement. And that data was able to show us what we needed. It also kind of helped us understand the usage of our PTO internally, what it was being used for, and our learning budget as well. Yeah. So a lot of organizations will add like learning stipends, for example, especially if they're very heavily focused on growth and innovation, especially as one of their core values. But it's how do you find how do you find the time and space for that learning and growth internally as well?
Hmm.
And it was really to kind of add to that.
Do you find it's been easier to sell new perks or benefits that don't come with a dollar attached to them internally? Maybe that's, and maybe I'm answering my own
Yeah,
question, but is that generally easier?
100%. Yeah. As long as you can show the return on investment on that as well, right? So,
Mm.
while it's not a dollar value, you can look at it from the other perspective of like utilization, how many client calls might not be taken during that time, and how are you going to make up for that? What are we going to get in return? So in this case, it was a message around trust and autonomy, right? Like really giving
Mhm.
that back to the employees. And at the end of the day, we do hire adults. We're not there to babysit them, you know, and manage their time in their seats and so on forth. So it's creating that relationship of trust and empowering employees to kind of manage their workload. Uh, One of the key things is when you offer flexibility like this, you'd be surprised with how much more employees are able to accomplish because they really do want to prove themselves and show that they can be trusted and empowered to do their best work.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. You hire adults, not toddlers, right? We can treat them with we don't have to treat them with kid gloves. Um, and so Erin, from your perspective, what have you seen resonate most with candidates when they're evaluating an SMB maybe against an enterprise level business, or they're in an enterprise level? How does an SMB kind of attract that talent over? Are there any surprising small but mighty perks that um, the audience might learn from?
Yeah, I think a couple. I mean, we've already touched on flexibility. I think the post-COVID world, when it went from everyone at home all the time to now the pendulum has swung either all the way back or at least halfway back, where there's like a hybrid or there's a fully in office environment. I think regardless of like where it falls on that is having flexibility. Um, and intentional time. So if you are doing hybrid, like what is that time that's spent in the office and why? And if you're always on Zoom calls the entire time you're in the office, it's probably not intentional time. So I think just having true flexibility. We've also had a client that they were hybrid, but the office kind of cleared out around 3 because everyone needed to get home, pick up their kids. And it was just kind of like a known thing. And it was part of their culture where, 3 to 4 was quiet. Everyone was able to kind of do what they needed to do and then sign on for kind of the last hour, 4 to 5. And so I think it's flexibility, but also showing that taking the flexibility is okay. Because I think there's a difference between saying we're flexible, but then not actually modeling that in real life. I think some of the other examples have already been touched on too of, essentially free, doing like half days in the summer, doing like half days, maybe a quarter. So it's kind of a recharge day. Sabbaticals. So being able to take off some chunk of time and kind of step away from your role, knowing that you can come back to it. Also some creativity around like mat and pat leaves, like whether it be top up. Obviously there is a budget then attached to that. My husband, when we had our daughter, his company had an extra 2 weeks of what they called baby days. So it was either the birth or the non-birth parent could take an extra 2 weeks during that full year. And so you could use it for sickness, for vacation, for just like survival.
That's a great idea because we all know they get
Yes,
daycare, they're sick, as we talked about before we
exactly.
jumped on this call. Yeah.
And I think another one is just going back to the flexibility. I think there's a neat thing that we've done at Artemis where both me and the other partner have gone on mat leave and come back. And we both did a phased approach, which I don't know if like large enterprises could actually adopt that at scale. And I think that is something that smaller companies can do. So we were able to come back, obviously when we chose to, but it was both before the full year. And kind of be able to then balance the dropping off our daughters or sons at daycare for the first time and having to pick them up and not feeling like we were fully stretched between both of the worlds at the same time. And so again, I think just like the nimbleness that you can have as an SMB and getting creative with, something like that, a phased approach, like at least face value, there's not a cost to it. But there's a huge value when it comes to kind of the confidence as someone who was coming back to work, that I didn't have to kind of choose between both my worlds.
I'll
Yeah,
actually add something to that. Oh,
no, I was just gonna say I also did a phased approach, and I cannot speak highly enough of it. And I'm so thankful that my last organization allowed me to do that. And based on my feedback to others coming back from mat leave, or even to the PNC department, like they started to encourage other parents returning from mat or pat leaves to do the same thing. And I agree that I think probably the smaller organizations have a better ability to do that faster. I don't know how easily a company the size of Google or Amazon would kind of implement that. Sorry, Japney, go ahead.
I'll give HR leaders a pro tip on that if they're not already doing it. But when designing a return to work, especially a phased return to work, it's always good to check in with the employees as well, just to see how involved they want to be, what that phased return looks like, what they need ahead of time before they truly start. That helps quite a bit as well. So that's something that I've implemented in some of the SMBs that I've worked at, really checking in, like, if they're maybe a month before they're planning to return, to see if they're actually ready to return at the date that they had said, what they need at that time, what they're thinking that phased approach will look like, and then having a plan pre-built out for them as well.
Yeah, I love that. And Erin, you mentioned, the flexibility and being able to, be home, be in the office, a hybrid situation, that really came into play during COVID. Have you seen a difference between the types of benefits or flexibility that people have been looking for kind of since the world's gone back to normal? I'll put that in in quotations, but I know before COVID, it probably would have been more of a focus on, is there full health benefits? Is there full, like what's my vacation allowance? And personally, I know I'm much more focused on flexibility now, especially after the experience going through COVID. Have you seen a difference in what candidates are looking for and what resonates with them, or no?
Yes and no. I don't know if it's necessarily tied to COVID, but just the having benefits start from day one. It's interesting. It used to be like a negotiation tool, at least for a lot of the roles that we filled. And now it's kind of expected that obviously A, they're in place, even at small companies. And B, that they start from day one, which I think is interesting and probably something that's slightly shifted over the last couple of years. Kind of going back to your original question of kind of like the pre-COVID, post-COVID, I think it's if a company is hybrid, because I think, again, what we've seen is there are fewer fully remote. They still for sure exist, but like from now compared to probably 3 years ago, it's a big difference in terms of how many companies are fully remote. But I think if there is a hybrid ask, just understand, again, I know I've kind of mentioned it, but I do think it comes up more and more and more, is the why behind it. Like, why is that time that I have to be there? If I am in office, is it okay if I come in 7 to 3 instead of 9 to 5, especially if you're driving from like Kitchener to Toronto? Can I avoid the traffic? So I think going back to your question of how they shifted, no, but I think after everyone lived through COVID and showed that for the most part, we could do our jobs and do them remotely, and being able to balance life a little bit more when you're asking people no longer to do it fully remote. I think just making sure that the companies have the why ready to say the why behind, why are we asking you to be in person on this cadence at this time? And we see candidates being totally open to it, assuming that there's a very logical why.
Interesting. Japney, are there a few quick wins for HR leaders that you might recommend that they could implement within the next 3 to 6 months? Obviously, with SMBs being a little bit more flexible to do things quickly, that won't overwhelm their limited resources?
Yeah, I think one is really, I think I had mentioned this earlier, but really pausing to understand your workforce better. Um, it's definitely going beyond the surface level demographics that we're used to collecting, but really understanding we've got so many different generations within a workplace now, which we likely haven't seen for quite some time now. So really going well past like the age and probably like the gender demographics, but really understanding the types of families that exist within how many, so using those surveys, sort of stay interviews and pulse checks to kind of understand individuals' lived experiences. That'll help you kind of build out your benefits better. But um, sort of big impact, small items that individuals can definitely do is flexibility tweaks. I know Erin's talked about this quite a bit, but really adjusting core hours, no meeting windows to allow for individuals to do deep work, and also kind of work around their personal schedules as well. Low cost mental health support or wellness days that can be built into your PTO policies, separating PTO with vacation and sick days as well, just allowing for a little bit of flexibility so employees don't necessarily feel like their hands are tied when it comes to using vacation and so on forth. And I think peer-to-peer recognition is another one that doesn't cost much, but definitely boosts morale in the organization as well. So those are definitely things that individuals, leaders can consider. And again, it's like, so just implementing some of these small things kind of shows the employees that you care, that you're hearing them, and you're also acting on some of the feedback that they're providing. So quick wins won't necessarily come from like copying what other companies do. I know a lot of organizations, we went through this whole huge phase of where we wanted to be the next Google and Amazon, but that's what they're doing for their organization isn't necessarily going to work for yours. It really comes down to understanding your workforce and ensuring that it ties back to your values as an organization as well, really reinforcing that, because that's what organizations are joining you for. And the other thing I've noticed is, pre-COVID days, we were just talking about that, perks were huge. We were really looking at like offices, what does the office have to offer? Do we have a ping pong table? Do we offer snacks and all that fun stuff? But now employees and candidates really care about the benefits, right? Like Erin said, do we get benefits on day one? Is there mental health support? Is there, the list kind of goes on.
Mm-hmm. The pulse surveys that you've been talking about, do you like to run on a certain cadence of those, or do you have a recommended cadence? Is it annual? Is it quarterly?
So semi-annually, I actually do benefit pulse surveys. So they're like quick 2-3 questions to kind of figure out what are employees actually using, what's one thing that they'd be okay trading off, understanding my utilization on a regular basis as well of those benefits, especially if the company's investing money in that. So again, if you have the capacity in your team, if you have the resources, I would recommend doing benefit-related pulse checks at least once or twice, or even total rewards once or twice a year. That really helps. And then with the other pulse surveys, we've got tools internally that can do them monthly. I do them bi-monthly, and I'll try to change the topic each month just to ensure that I'm covering everything as much as I possibly can in those pulse surveys, while trying to keep ensuring that there's no survey fatigue internally either.
Yeah, that can always be a problem, right? I love that, comparing both the utilization rate from the insurance or benefits side of things, wellness tools side of things, but comparing it against what people actually want or need.
And a
hearing
lot
it
of
from
things
them, I think, is important.
Yeah, and a lot of things that we offer might not be covered in our benefits plans as well. So when we get those utilization reports from our benefits brokers, they might not include things like a learning stipend or travel benefits that we offer, that organizations offer. So it's good to kind of get that comparison and see what the utilization looks like even on those internal benefits that you offer.
Yeah, I love that. So Erin, for leaders who are worried about costs, have you seen any creative partnership or vendor strategies that have worked well? I know we're seeing a few more, partnership approaches come into play, and I'm curious if you've seen any be effective with the different leaders that you've been working with.
I will say probably Jetney is more of the expert in this question than I am, but from what I have seen and what we've done at Artemis, so we're part of Tech Life, which is through like Cowan and Manulife, where it's like a group cost. And so we're
Mhm.
able to kind of share and spread the costs across like multiple tech companies, and we got opted into that. So I'd say if there's any types of those types of groups where you can get pretty competitive benefits, but at a discounted price because you're within a group that all are getting the same benefits. That's one. Another, actually, my husband, the last two companies he's been at, he's had Honeybee. And just like the ultimate flexibility, and I feel like that's the word of this entire webinar, because you can pick and choose how you want to allocate your benefits. And so I think it kind of bakes in the idea of not one size fits all, where you can choose what do you want covered in terms of dental health prescriptions. Do you want to allocate almost all of it to your healthcare spending account? And so I think, again, in terms of, I don't know if it's enterprise level perks, but I do think that there's an element of it being able to be molded to each employee that is joining, which I do think probably has a higher perk than just the benefits themselves, because everyone is kind of able to pick what they need in their life stage. So those are the two that come to mind. I don't know if you have any other ideas.
Those are actually two of the big players in in the industry. I've seen a lot of small organizations that are under like 10 employees also just do health spending accounts as opposed to a structured benefits plan. That also helps, especially with small budgets, to just allocate, I don't know, $2,500 and just picking a number out of the air, depending on what an organization's budget is. But that, again, offers employees a little bit of flexibility depending on how they want to use it. And it's easier for them to offer that as well, as opposed to,
Right.
Going into a pooled benefits plan as well.
I think the other difference, kind of going back to my comment about it's expected day one, even with tiny startups, it's almost expected. Like, I think in maybe the before, if you were like sub 20 people, there was this understanding of like, oh, we're too small to have benefits. And I don't think that's the case anymore. So I think the need to either do stipends or healthcare spending account, if that's the least you can do, is still a requirement, which I do think has changed.
Yeah, so to be able to do something that supports people. Yeah.
And I would agree. It's definitely like no longer a nice to have. It needs to be included from day one. A lot of individuals, it's a deal breaker, right?
Yeah, flexibility is the word of this conversation for sure, which I love because I think it's so important, right? And I think it goes hand in hand with being nimble and adaptable, right? Gone are the days of taking a year to turn the ship. But Japanese, is there any benefit that you wish you could provide to your employees now that you haven't been able to, or you've been blocked on? And I'm curious about why that might, like what it is, but why that might be too.
A big one for me, and this one is quite personal for me, just given my own fertility journey for the last 5 years, I've seen a lot of individuals job hop for better support, including myself. I'm just looking for benefits, trying to optimize my benefits that are offered in our traditional healthcare plans. So whether it's the medication coverage or you're simply looking to reduce stress, I think it would be great to see organizations just spending a little bit more time when it comes to reproductive health and potentially offering more comprehensive support in this area, and also family building support. Right? There's so much more to it than just IVF. IVF coverage. You got to think about adoption, surrogacy, miscarriage support. A lot of individuals now are considering egg freezing. Or alternative treatments. I think just again having that considered goes a long way. I think it's even just flexible work arrangements. Going back to flexibility, recognizing the emotional and physical toll this can take on individuals. So, yeah, the barriers are there when it comes to the traditional health plans for sure, but they weren't built for this, and we're in a very different era now with individuals at very different life stages considering various things. So companies, one, I feel like face a budget constraint. But again, there's that flexibility that we can offer, personalization and benefits plan. And the other one I think is lack of understanding on how complex the whole reproductive health era
Mhm.
is right now, and a lack of awareness of other solutions that exist. So yeah, I think family building today is quite diverse when you think of the LGBT community, single parents trying to build families, blended families. So benefits really need to reflect that. And I don't think it's no longer like a woman's issue anymore either.
Yeah, it's definitely obviously it's the realm that my story is in, but it's very much a hot topic, right? Is how are we better
Yeah.
supporting our employees through their entire reproductive health journey? It's not just necessarily about the fertility aspect of that, but how perimenopause and menopause impacts your workforce, and PCOS or endometriosis, and the impact of any sort of challenge has, yes, on women, but also especially in the fertility side of things. Like the data out there now suggests that it's male factor infertility 30 to 50% of any infertility cases. So, very much impacts the entire family, your entire workforce. And so we know, I think we can all agree that's a hot topic in the PNC and HR world right now. But I'm curious, Erin, if there's any other hot topic benefits questions that kind of come up from candidates that have been, more, gaining speed more recently, or maybe surprised you in any way, or are you mostly hearing on the kind of reproductive health side of things?
It's kind of along the same vein, especially with, I mean, there's lots of, I feel like, hot button topics that are in our world today.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like one benefit that kind of ties into reproductive rights and just honestly like health rights is if you have employees in the US and they are in a state that they cannot access the mental or physical health coverage or services that they need, I've seen companies actually pay for the expense of them, a partner, not only the expense for them to travel, but also to stay, to access. And so I think thinking through, even again, in terms of, we've talked about flexibility in terms of life stage, but even geographic area can
Mm-hmm.
greatly differ of what they actually need to be able to access the same level of healthcare as, say, someone in Ontario. And so we also touched on it in the very beginning, but I think really thinking through what are your core values as a company? Like one of ours is like deeply caring at Artemis. And so I think it's thinking through, okay, so in order to make sure that all of our employees are deeply cared for, what are all of their individual circumstances or variables that we need to take into account? And so obviously one is in the US when healthcare isn't as available or even accessible.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thinking about the impact of your workforce's geography too, right? If you're a small startup where you have 10 people, that might not be as much of a consideration, but even teams 30, 40, 50 people can be largely distributed, which, yes, after COVID or because of COVID, we were able to hire in larger geographic areas, right? So I think that's
Yeah.
more of a
And
consideration now than
yeah.
it was before. Yeah.
And I would say like yes and no to that. Like I think that we work with companies that are 10 people. Those 10 people could be across Europe, the US,
Yeah, fair.
Canada. And so, yes, is there a higher probability that you'll have a larger geographic area with a larger company? For sure. But I think with COVID, there is this element, and also with specified talent. Like there's so many really cool things that are happening with tech right now where the pool of talent that actually has done that thing or can do that thing or has had the education is somewhat finite. And so there is an element of even some of these tiny companies, if they're doing something that's kind of bleeding edge, they are collecting talent from potentially all over the world. So yeah, I think obviously that also adds a level of complexity for some of these small companies that may just even be getting their foot in the door of what are benefits, and then also having to think through what are global benefits for only our 10 employees.
Well, and to your point, if there's only a small group of people who have done the thing you're trying to do or have that area of expertise, and you want to attract them away from maybe a larger business with larger benefits or bigger budgets who can pay more money, like how do you do that, right? And so then the flexibility comes in again, right? Where you might need to be doing things like, well, in order to get this person, we need to have fertility benefits, or we need to have wellness perks that allow for gym memberships, or we pay the internet, or what, whatever that demand may be from different people depending on their circumstance or region, right? So again, that flexibility really kind of comes in to play there. And I'll kind of pose this final question for you both. So when you're trying to be flexible and nimble, and then obviously in some situations there's a lot of benefits providers, insurance providers that maybe you can't be super flexible with or make changes very quickly. So what workarounds or creative compromises have you seen that maybe help close those gaps, or can allow them to do it without overextending their budgets, if you've seen that at all?
One thing we did was credit-based benefits, and I'm seeing quite a few companies that are starting to do this. It definitely happens. It's a lot easier to implement in the US, I find, but it's essentially allowing employees the flexibility to set the amount to set an amount that they want to allocate to certain things. So like the gym membership we talked about, but also it could be towards additional mental health support, professional services development, or even family building support. A lot of organizations do budget for things like professional development and mental health support, but not everyone needs that support. So again, where can you add that level of personalization within the organization without increasing the overall spend? I think that's a great workaround. So really looking at your total rewards and who's using what within your organization, and where can you add that little bit of flexibility where you're looking at the utilization rates, you're looking at where the high satisfaction is within those within that package as well, to see where you can alleviate some of that.
I think it also depends on which benefit you're trying to find a workaround for, because I would say that probably differs based upon which benefit. Like I know one thing that we've done recently is we've sponsored a body that's within tech, and with that they run programming. And so with our sponsorship, which arguably is like tied to the business success and marketing and all of those pieces, I'm also able to go through their course for free. And so it's personal development for me that's not an added cost. So I think it depends of like what is the thing that you're trying to find a workaround for. Something that we've done, especially in the realm of family planning, is if anyone on our team is considering egg freezing, we've opened it up to the team that as a business, we can offer a loan to help cover some of the cost of that. Again, that's obviously beneficial. We're only 10 people. And so there is an element of, again, size of company has a huge impact on how that can scale. Obviously has a cost associated with it. But I think in terms of understanding the benefit, it shows up in our employees in terms of loyalty and retention, and taking away the pressure of that, it does pay off in other ways. So I think to answer the question with really not an answer, I think it totally depends of what the workaround can look like, is depending on the thing that you're trying to achieve.
Well, I really love that too, because especially being a Canadian organization. So if you're somebody who wants to go through and do egg freezing, or somebody who wants to go through fertility treatments, loans or financial borrowing isn't really a thing here. So there's a lot of programs in the States where, you can get loans through various companies like Gaia, for example, but that really is not available here. So it's great to hear that even as an employer, Artemis is able to do that for the employees to kind of fill a gap that is not available to people here. So I do love to hear that. Awesome. Well, the word of the day was flexibility for sure. And I think that's great. And I think that's actually the one one of the advantages that a small, medium-sized business has, is the ability that they can be more nimble. They can move more quickly in a lot of ways. And so if it needs to be in response to either an individual candidate's needs or your entire workforce's needs. I think they definitely have the upper hand in having the ability to do that. And sometimes it's just a matter of figuring out how you can do that with perhaps not a huge amount of money or spend in the short term. So thank you both. Really appreciate the conversation. And if you shared your email with us when you registered, we will share some resources out after this airs to help you generate some creative ideas around things you can do to bolster your total rewards packages with maybe not a huge amount of spend or, leaning into that flexibility. So thank you both. And thanks everybody for joining us, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.